friends. Welcome to episode 45 of School Librarians United. I am your host, Amy Herman. This podcast is dedicated to the issues and challenges school librarians face every day. As a school librarian starting my 13th year, I found myself asking the question, where is the podcast that will help me do my job? I wanted a podcast which addressed the nuts and bolts of running a successful library program. I don't claim to have the answers, but I hope that this is a platform to share resources and exchange ideas. Now is a perfect time to mention that all the ideas and opinions expressed in this podcast by myself and my interview guests are our own and do not reflect those of our school districts. When incorporating research, I always make sure to cite my sources. So whether you are a novice or a veteran school librarian, this podcast is something for you. I'd like to extend a very special welcome and aloha this week to listeners Caitlin on Hawaii, Meredith in North Carolina, Leah in Missouri, as well as her fellow school librarians in the Greater Kansas City Association of School Librarians. Finally, I'd also like to say a very big thank you and hello to all the Michigan school librarians who attended our annual state conference in Bay City for these past 3 days. I welcome you and all listeners to reach out with your feedback and episode suggestions either on Facebook or Twitter, or you can reach me at the email address schoollibrariansunited@gmail.com. If you include your mailing address, I will be sure to send you a podcast sticker. So this past Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday was our state convention for school librarians. It was held in Bay City, Michigan. If you'd like to get a better idea of where Bay City is in the state of Michigan, simply hold your left hand out so it faces away from you. And then Bay City is exactly the point where your thumb separates from the rest of your hand. And it was very beautiful. We had gorgeous weather, and you could see the water from our hotel. The name of our organization for school librarians in the state of Michigan is MAME, otherwise known as Michigan Association for Media in Education, and this event is hosted every year. During the pre-conference, which was Wednesday, I was concerned I might not have my voice back, and I was speaking on a panel discussion regarding graphic novels in our collection. So I ended up making, just as a backup plan, a Powtoon for my panel discussion, and I was contributing to the conversation in a little short piece called Advocating for Our Graphic Novel Collection. I'll include a link to my Powtoon in the show notes. And while this video is only 2 minutes long, it is a really nice spot from which I started my conversation about the pushback I've received over the years, because the fact that my graphic novel collection has grown exponentially has not gone unnoticed by my teachers. We all know what it feels like when teachers offer unsolicited commentary on our collection and our program. And many times it's in regards to my graphic novel collection. While I am thrilled when students are scrambling to get their favorite titles, many teachers and parents have expressed a preference that students check out chapter books instead, and I find myself defending my graphic novel collection often. During our pre-conference, we also had the opportunity to hear from Dave Burgess via Zoom. Dave Burgess is the author of the New York Times bestseller, Teach Like a Pirate, as well as the picture book, P is for Pirate, an inspirational ABCs for educators, which he co-authored with his wife, Shelley Burgess, and is illustrated by Genesis Kohler. This book has great potential for building PD, and some of the examples are obvious, like C is for crew or M is for magic, while others required some explanation, like B is for bungee and taking that leap of faith, or N is for net, when we encourage students to take risks and the teachers will be there to catch them. It didn't take long for a room full of school librarians to challenge ourselves to come up with our own ABCs. With everyone's permission, I asked if I could share this collaborative effort on the podcast. A is for advocacy, access, accessible, ask, anthology, archival, autobiography. B is for books, budget, bibliography, biography, book buddies, book fairs, bibliophile. C is for curate, collaborate, communicate, community, comedy, creative, connections, curriculum, code, compassion, and chaos. my favorite. D is for digital citizenship, diversity, digital design, thinking, drama, dedicated, and defender. E is for equity, empathetic, ebooks, engage, explore, empower, encourage, expert, educate, education, educator, everyone and everything. F is for fun, fiction, fake news, fantasy, facilitator, friendship, free, fairy tale, folktale, fable. G is for graphic novel, global, genre, growth. H is for help, home, historical fiction, humor, heart, and hive. I is innovative, informational, instructional, include, infuse, inquire, imagination, and intellectual freedom. J is for joy, journey, Jack or Jill of all trades, and juggler. K is for kids, knowledge, and kindness. L stands for lead, literacy, love, learn, learner, library, and librarian. M stands for making, media literacy, mystery, memoir, mindful, and magic. N is noisy, narrative, nonfiction, and navigate. O stands for open, optimistic, opportunities, and octopus. P stands for persuade, poetry, partners, picture book, perception, proactive, and professional. Q stands for quality, question, and never quiet. R stands for read, research, risk taker, realistic fiction, resources, resourceful, references, relationships, and rainbow in relationship to our inclusive collection. S stands for silly, safe, space, STEM, STEAM, suspense, support, school, symbolism, and serve. T is teach and teacher, technology, and time. U is unconventional, unleashing. V is virtual, vacation, and visionary. W are words and wonder, wow, welcoming, and weeding. X stands for exciting, xenagogue, which is another way of saying guide, xenodokial, which also means welcoming and hospitable. Y stands for YA, yay, Yoda, and you. Z stands for zealous, zip, zen, zany, and zoo. Thank you very much to everyone in the room, because when we all gave it about 10 minutes, it was not hard to come up with our own alphabet. The tricky part would have to be narrowing it down to just one word per letter. I knew this year at our annual conference I wanted to try something new. We offer a session called Roundtables. In the largest room, typically reserved for the keynotes and the author breakfast, we would situate 8 to 10 stations scattered around the outside of the room with tables labeled with numbers. Attendees are given the offerings in advance and have 3 15-minute sessions to learn either a mini lesson or a quick resource share. I asked for a spot in the corner furthest from the door. I prepared a list of prompts from which attendees could choose to respond. I brought a handheld microphone, and I gave anyone who was interested the opportunity to contribute to today's episode. I would also like to thank Tom Covington and Michael Jepcott, hosts of TOSA's Talking Tech podcast, for describing a similar strategy I believe they called Manic Minutes when they attended conferences. So here are the courageous volunteers who decided to share with you today.
Tanya, and I am a high school librarian in the Kalamazoo area. And the biggest time-saving library hack that I have learned this year is called Library Aware. And what it does is it's a program that allows you to create flyers and even big posters and smaller bookmarks. And what I like about it is it has the covers. You can go get the covers for the books right there. So some examples I've done this year, my 2 most popular books right now are It by Stephen King. So I did, while you're waiting for It to come back, how about this one? Or The Hate You Give is still really popular. And so I say, if you like The Hate You Give, try these books. And just they've really helped just in color in my library, but also definitely a time saver. Another question I can answer is a strategy for getting books back on time. I wouldn't necessarily say this is for on time, but getting them back at all. I really play it up like, oh my gosh, it's like Christmas today when they do bring it back. So I feel like if you are just not harping on them, if you see them, you give them a gentle reminder about it, and then when they do bring it back, you really just make a big deal about it and think and be like, oh, the book is home, and then making sure I talk to them and say, well, what did you think of it since you had it for so long, that kind of thing.
I really appreciate it. Thank you very much, Tanya.
Hi, I'm Michael French, and I'm a librarian in the elementary level. The best library hack that I use is for shelf markers. I make shelf markers for my K through second grade students out of poster board, different kinds of colors for different grade levels. I put their name on it, and then I put their barcode information on the back side. So all they have to do is bring me their card, and I can scan their card, and I can check in and check out books with them. And it saves me a lot of time trying to look them up, ask what their name is, try to get to know everybody's last name and that kind of thing. So it's easy. It's also an easy way to kind of sort through and see who has an overdue or what's going on with their record. So that's my library hack.
It's also a great way to take attendance and know who's there and who's not.
Absolutely, it is. Yes, it is a good way to do that too.
Wow. That's fantastic. Thank you very much, Michael.
Hi, I'm Terry, and I am an elementary librarian. And currently my goal for this year is to learn to play the ukulele so I can play songs with the books that I read to my students.
Oh, that is adorable. Oh, that is adorable. I think your students are so lucky that you would be willing to do that. Do you sing to your students right now?
Oh, I do, with great drama.
What I have to ask, what is their favorite song? Or you have a lining up song or a sitting down song to get ready?
I have to say I owe a lot to Jim Gill, who does a lot with songs for children. So I've used a lot of his in my classes so far.
He has instructional videos on YouTube, isn't that correct?
Yes, it is. And he also has CDs, and he streams music, too.
Oh, that's a great resource for elementary. Thank you very much, Terry.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Jackie. I am a high school librarian, and one of my favorite library programs that I started last year was our monthly trivia contests. So this month we're doing famous lines from Halloween movies, and the kids come in and they match them, and then the winner gets a prize, which is, like a candy bar. One of the most popular ones last year was my March Book Madness, where I actually sent a survey out to all the kids in the school asking them to rank their favorite books. And then I had kids come in and predict the winners, and whoever, every week we'd have who picked the right winner of that bracket. And then by the end of the month, we had our favorite book of the high school, which of course turned out to be Harry Potter that year. So we'll see what it is this year.
Hi, my name is Beverly Banks, and I'm a media specialist in Wall Lake. I'm at 2, and I actually travel to 3 elementary schools. Wixom, Meadowbrook, give a shout out to Glengarry also. Hi, everyone. It's exciting to be here at MAME. So I'd like to share my favorite way to collaborate. Now, since I travel, and I really don't have a lot of time to catch teachers when they're on their block or their prep time, what I will do as they're coming or going, I will talk to them even as we're passing in the hallway, or I'll stop them when we have a couple of minutes, and I'll say, what are you working on? Are you doing historical fiction now? Are you doing poetry? And whatever they're doing, please drop me an email, and then I'll pull the books for their classes, and I'm ready to help out with book talks or specialized books. So collaboration does not have to be sitting down and having an hour-long meeting with a colleague, because who has the time, honestly? So I just grab them, even for a 5-minute talk. Thank you for cheering for that. Just to touch bases and find out what they're doing in their grade level. And whatever one teacher's doing, chances are all of the teachers in that grade level are doing it. So I'll kind of spread the love around. So if they're all studying historical fiction, I'll book talk and pull books for all of the 4th grade or 5th grade. So that's my favorite way to collaborate. I just call it a grab and talk, and it works. I don't get to be a part of everything, but I get to be a part of some things, and that really helps us.
Hi, my name is Michelle, and I am an elementary school librarian. The best library hack I would use, that I have used, is flexible seating during checkout time. It encourages the students to be on task during their silent reading, and I don't have as many classroom management problems. They all want to have their own special flexible area and seat, and it becomes very quiet during checkout time.
Can you give me some examples of the type of flexible seating you have? I mean, they are tables and chairs, or it's a variety of seating?
Yes, I do have a variety. I have scoop chairs, which are like little rockers. All the kids from the pre-Ks all the way to 5th grade love to use those. I have little ottomans that they can move around in different parts of the library, as well as stools. A couple chairs that are swivels. And as well as the table and chairs, they like to also just take little footstools that I use for the younger students to get to the high shelves. And they scatter those around the library too. Find little corners to read in.
Hi, my name is Carrie, and I am a school librarian. I'm going to share a strategy for convincing the most stubborn student to check out books. It always starts with a question. Unfortunately, I usually start with an open-ended one that says, "What do you like?" And then they stare at me. So that's not the best strategy to use. Instead, right after I make that mistake, I follow up with this question. Do you want it to be true or made up? If you're working with students that are really good with fiction and nonfiction and the difference, you can use those words. But after they answer that question, if they say they want it to be true, I have a list of questions that I ask them. What do you want to know about? Do you want to know about space? Animals? If it's animals, what's your favorite animal? History? What time in history? Countries? Which countries are you interested in learning about? If it's about people, I ask them, what kinds of things they like. After they tell me they want a book about a person, well, what kind of person do you want it to be about? Sports, do you want to learn about a sport? Do you want to learn about some science topic? And usually they will hit on at least one of those things. If it's fiction, I run through these questions. Do you want it to be funny, sad, realistic, scary? About sports, about animals, magic? Do the animals have to talk? All of those questions. Here's the key though. You have to know your collection, so that you can then bring them to those specific books that they're looking for.
Hi, my name is Martha Spear. I'm the high school librarian at Berkeley High School, and my favorite strategy for getting students to return books on time is to put a rubber band on their wrist, preferably a wrist that doesn't already have something on it, and then I say, don't take that rubber band off until you bring me the book. Now, the rumor is they think I'm going to snap it or do something awful, but I said, I'm mean, but I'm not that mean. But that's what works.
I really like that's a very, we could actually just raid the supply closet, and your solution is fairly cost effective.
It's very cheap and very effective. Now, it doesn't work on a Friday because who knows what happens over the weekend. But during the week, if I catch a kid, and I've had kids go, I've seen you do this before. It really works. I said, yes, it does.
Hi, my name is Erin. I'm a high school media specialist. This year, my goal is to collaborate with the social studies department about primary resources and research in general. Right now, the English department is shouldering the burden of research, and really all departments can help us bring research to students.
Can I ask, are you going to focus primarily on your print collection, or how do you integrate your digital collection into that process?
So my biggest goal is to introduce the teachers to mel.org. They're not really familiar with that. They're not sure how to navigate that. So I think this would be a great avenue to show them how to use the digital resources, that they don't have to come to the library all the time. They can use these in their classrooms.
Well, I think empowering students to be able to do research remotely really does help win a lot of fans to the research skills we have to teach them.
I agree.
Hi, my name is Janine, and I am an elementary and middle school librarian, and the best library hack I would use would be makerspace sticker posters for middle school students who bring their school ID to library checkout.
Can you explain a little bit about those sticker posters?
So to encourage kids to bring their ID tags, we would reward, so carrot versus stick, the children who bring along their ID tags, and then they can put sticker of their choice onto these posters, and eventually, it's like color by number, and you can see what it is, and it's a lot of fun for everyone to guess what it's supposed to be. It's usually something like the Mona Lisa or, some very famous painting.
So it's a mosaic, and each one gets to contribute a little square.
Yes, and as the year wears on, I'll give more stickers. 3 stickers for those with an ID, and 5 stickers, and maybe 12 stickers towards the end of the year.
Fantastic. Thank you very much.
Hi, my name is Emmy, and I am a first-year elementary librarian. A challenge we have had to overcome in my library this year is the merging of 2 elementary libraries into one.
Oh my gosh, so does that mean you were there when they closed the other one? You weren't.
It was 2 elementary libraries that were closed. I was not at either one of them, but they were both packed up and moved into one brand new space, and I had to unpack them. I had some help, but it was definitely a challenge.
Can I ask, was this also an opportunity to weed while you were doing that? The hope is that you might have been somewhat selective and not putting every single book on the shelf.
I didn't have a choice, so every book went on the shelf, and we are weeding one shelf at a time. We're up to the 500s now, so we're starting with nonfiction.
That's amazing. Well, that's going to be quite a journey. I think that that's a good example of some of our projects which we take on, which will be accomplished in a long-term project. I got to give you a lot of credit. That sounds absolutely daunting. We are going to be closing 2 buildings and moving those materials, but we have the advantage of going in first and being selective about the things that we are taking out. So I have to ask you, how have you been tackling this before your classes arrive, during your lunch?
So I am very blessed. I have a clerk. My clerk has been doing triage at checkout. So if a book looks bad or comes in looking not good, she's been pulling it, and we've been discarding as we go. And then we just do a shelf at a time. I pick a shelf that day, and I try to get through it through the whole day. And she's been picking a shelf, and we just put them all on a cart, and we go back through that cart and decide which ones go and which ones stay.
Let me ask a delicate question. Since there is a significant number of books which will not be going back on the shelf, have you been instructed on what you're to do with the books once they've been discarded?
So I have a little leeway here. I put them, if they are not bad books, like books that have inaccurate information, I do put them out for classroom libraries. From there, they can go to the free little library. But if they're not gone within a week, then they disappear gently.
I had an entire episode on books that disappear very quietly, and it's a dirty little secret that we all have. Go take a listen. Thank you so much, and have a good conference.
Thank you.
I am so appreciative to all the school librarians who participated. It is safe to say that not everyone I approached was interested, and more than a few flat out rejected the idea of talking on my podcast. I am excited that over the course of the entire conference, when I attended a session I thought particularly useful, I approached the speaker and suggested we could record an episode on that topic. I was always met with a great deal of excitement. This conference really inspired me to broaden my range of topics, knowing that I can call upon the expertise of so many Michigan school librarians, and I find it very reassuring. I was very fortunate to snag a few minutes with the chairperson of this year's conference. In Michigan, the president of our state organization is in actuality a 3-year commitment. The first year, you serve as chair for the state convention. During year 2, you are president, and in year 3, you are the immediate past president. And each role comes with its own set of obligations and job responsibilities. Here is my interview with this year's chair for our state convention, Kat Kearns.
I'd like to have a very special conversation with our president-elect. Her name is Kat Kearns, and she is this year's MAME 46 conference chair. So I was very excited that she could carve out some time because she is running this entire 3-day conference and is very busy. So Kat, tell me, how is this year gone?
Amazing. This is probably, it's hard to describe how much I have learned about our association, our profession, and about the amazing people that I get to work with.
Wow. So I'm sure that you had some concerns when you became the conference chair. This would have been more than a year ago. How did you start to wrap your head around the task at hand?
Well, they actually asked me to become the president-elect, I think 4 or 5 times, and I turned them down. And then we have this amazing group called MAME Forever, and they had come to help me at my building. And they spent, I think, most of the time weeding my collection or helping me weed my collection, talking me into why I should do this and what a great opportunity it is. So I was very, very worried about how much work it was going to be, how I was going to pull this off with my crazy busy life and all of my kids. And I found out that being a part of MAME is like being part of a family.
Oh, that's amazing. For listeners, I'll explain that MAME Forever is our retirees. So these are individuals who were once in the classroom and in the school libraries, and they are now volunteering to support school libraries around Michigan in any way they can.
They are an amazing group. Every time I need help, they're all going, "This is it. Just here, tell me what you need done. What can I do for you? How can I back you up? Go do what you need to take care of. We'll take care of the little stuff."
Did anything about preparing for our state conference surprise you along the way?
Not really, but I've planned a lot of big events. There were a few things you have to realize that not everything is going to go exactly as planned, and you have to smile and nod and roll with it a lot of times, but that's what makes it fun. If everything was perfect, it wouldn't be any fun.
I appreciate that. Tell me, moving forward, you now are going to be president of our state organization. How have you thought about how that's going to change this year for you?
Well, I haven't thought about it too much because I have to first survive our conference. I have thought about some of the things that we have going on that I would like to continue. I just sat through an amazing lunch with all of our past presidents. It was a little intimidating being with all the dignitaries and all of the nice things or amazing things that they have done for our state. And I think they're going to help me focus. I want to sit down and talk to our past board members and find out what things they think are really important and meld them with the things I think are important, and that's how I'm going to choose my path for next year.
Oh, that's fantastic. What advice would you give to anybody considering a leadership position at the state level of their organization?
You definitely want to do it. Go for it. It'll be the most amazing experience you've ever had. You will not regret it, even when you're exhausted and thinking, what in the world was I thinking? They will always have your back, and I think these people will become your best friends.
That's incredible. I can't tell you how much I appreciate that you stepped up and pulled off this wonderful conference. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So my own presentation for this conference is titled Challenge Accepted, Reader's Advisory and Your Most Challenging Readers. The presentation lasted an hour long, mostly because I was very fortunate to have audience participation. I'll give you a brief overview as well as attach a link in the show notes. Be sure to check this out because there are links to lessons embedded within the Google Slides. So before we can talk about Reader's Advisory, I wanted to look at checkout and what can sometimes complicate our checkout with our students. And in order to do this, it's really important that we look at the big picture. And one of those things is to recognize that a student's prior history with the library will affect just how successful or how positive they feel about coming to checkout each time. Students who have a history of damaging library books or losing their library books or incurring the wrath of a parent who is furious when a book has been lost or needed to be replaced, oftentimes these are students who will not necessarily be nearly as excited for book checkout as, say, your other students. And as I go into later detail, having built a good relationship with your students and with the teachers you work with oftentimes can give you an idea. When you're meeting students for the very first time, it's obviously difficult to know what their past experiences are with checkout. So the sooner you can find that out, the better. Another thing which can complicate checkout with our students is when you have students with little or no experience in visiting the library. When I get students who are young fives, maybe 4.5 years old, it's very obvious which of my students have been to the big library before. And the students who don't oftentimes ask me if they can keep the book. They ask me if they have to buy the book. And this does require a little bit of explanation. And finally, sometimes checkout isn't nearly as exciting for students who struggle with reading. And again, the better you get to know your students, the more likely you are to understand which students these are. In addition to those factors, keeping in mind that checkout can also be impinged upon because students are coming back from a field trip. When students come back from a field trip and the first thing they do is come up to the library to check out books, they can be absolutely zany. You can also imagine how nutty it can be when the students have had a guest teacher all day. When my students have had a guest teacher all day and they come up to the library, unfortunately, some of the shenanigans that might have been going on while they were in the classroom have found a way to creep into the classroom, into the library, and I've had to explain to them, you may have been in a room with a guest teacher, but you and I know each other. So I am ready to make sure that your teacher knows just how good a library checkout we had today. And keeping in mind, for me, book checkout is actually a 45-minute class with these students. So this isn't a, quick in-out 10 or 15-minute visit. This is 45 minutes with these students. So if they've had a guest teacher all day, unfortunately, they have decided for themselves that this is going to be a free-for-all. Time to rein them in. Another activity which you should be aware of is how school assemblies have an impact on our checkouts. Oftentimes, a school assembly is scheduled right in the middle of our library visit, which means that our checkout is going to be what we call a speed checkout. We have a quick checkout, run the books down to their lockers or their cubbies, and then get seated in the gym for the assembly. Another thing please be aware of is when your grades are doing their testing, and this applies to all grade levels. When the kids have been testing for any period of time during that day, they oftentimes come up to the library absolutely exhausted or a little batty. Some kids respond to testing differently than others, but oftentimes they really are fairly wiped out and perhaps not as enthusiastic about checking out books that day. Also, another thing you should remember is when recess is. If you teach elementary students, where recess falls in their day will have a direct impact on their activity level in the library. If you have them right before they have to go out to recess, they may think that this is just recess with books and heavy furniture. So again, be aware of when your classes have their recess. I had students, it was actually really perfect. They went to recess and then the next thing they did was come up to library and they were exhausted. They just wanted to sit down and quietly catch their breath and shift focus to checking out books. But boy, they were really wiped out after recess. Another thing you should keep in mind is when is rest time. I once had a schedule where my youngest students, these were 5-year-olds, came to the library between lunch and when they had their rest time. And I'm not kidding you, during story time, I had a couple sleepers who absolutely just curled up on the floor and went to sleep. And I let them sleep because in September, they still aren't on a schedule. So knowing when your littles have rest time is really important as well. Also keep in mind that issues in the classroom find their way into the library. So if there had been a lunchtime spat, or if there had been some kids who were not playing nicely on the playground, oftentimes these are things which you'll hear about and you'll see evidence of maybe some students squabble up in the library. Another thing you should keep in mind that complicates book checkout would be the obvious family issues. I got an email the other day because a parent was going to be going on a business trip, which was going to last more than a month. And obviously, when you're dealing with students, this really does throw the family routine off. As I mentioned before, the fighting and the frenemies, friendships shift very quickly in a school, and oftentimes all it takes is somebody to hurt someone else's feelings, and checkout is not going to be nearly as much fun. For our older students, every once in a while somebody decides to break up, and this happens during the day, and if you aren't aware, you may not know why somebody is having a bad day. And that also goes along with anxiety. Students who are wrestling with anxiety, especially in the older grades, oftentimes this will spill over into the time that we spend with them in the library, and appreciating that oftentimes their unenthusiastic response to you wanting them to check out books has nothing to do with the fact that you're checking out books to them, and everything to do with the fact that they are stressed out about relationships or school or grades. So, what are some solutions? First of all, my first solution is to familiarize yourself with the school calendar. I have multiple school calendars because I teach in multiple buildings, and the instant I find out about things, I make sure to get those on the calendar. And obviously, those include things like fire drills, evacuation drills, any type of activity that might take us out of the library, including when we have our book fairs, we don't do a book checkout. I go and teach in the classrooms. But anytime an assembly is scheduled or an instrumental concert, I make sure to have those in my calendar. So if we do need to do a speed checkout, I can plan for that. I also can't emphasize enough the importance of relationship building, because the more you know about your students and the better you work with your teachers, you will find that you can anticipate some of these problems, or you'll get the heads up. People will email you and let you know about things that might be going on, which will impact how the students are when they come to the library. Again, communicating with your teachers, I try to make sure that everyone knows that I would love a heads up if there are issues going on that would impact a student and their attitude overall when they come to library. Also, remember that when you see the students outside of the library, I'm always watching when I walk through the halls. I'm making my way to the staff lounge or getting copies. I always try to see what's going on between my students, and when they're going in and out of their lockers or they're getting ready for recess, you can learn a lot about the students, their interactions with their friends, if they're taking a soccer ball out to the playfield or if they're grabbing a football. These are all little observations which help you become better at Reader's Advisory. So let's consider some of the challenging student personalities. We have encountered all of these at some point or another, and I've decided to give them names. The first one is my student who's the hard pass. My student who says, "No thanks, I'm not checking out today." And this is frustrating. Obviously, it's hard not to feel a little offended, because this is what we do, checking out books and getting kids excited about reading. And for a student to just come in and say, "Nope, pass, I'm not doing this." One of the strategies that we discussed in our presentation was the idea of suggesting that, like any other class, like any other special, especially at the elementary level, these are activities that all of us do on a regular basis because it's part of the class. When you go to gym, you participate in the sport that's being taught that day. When you go to music, you sing the song that's been chosen for that day. When you go to art, you create something that your art teacher has planned. And the option to say, "No, I pass. I don't want to check out today. I don't want to sing. I don't want to play. I'm going to sit on the stage and talk to my friends." All of these things are really not the right way to approach library and how students go about doing what's expected of them in the class. So trying to explain to them from that perspective, and then go to the fun stuff. If you've got a joke section, like an 818, if you've got a great cookbook section, that's fun. Try to find some of the books that require perhaps less commitment or less investment. And one of my favorites is the 743s, How to Draw, because oftentimes students will be perfectly entertained doing that, or paper airplane books, How to Make Paper Airplanes or Origami. These are great books to give to the kids who are like, "I don't want to read a book today." Similarly, the other challenging student personality is, "I have a book at home." Okay, well, that's great. But after 45 minutes, your teacher is going to expect that you're coming back to the classroom with something. So again, I tried to pull out some of those books that perhaps don't require nearly an investment like a chapter book. But keep in mind, as students get older, the expectation is they're bringing home chapter books, or they're bringing those back to the classroom. So the fact that they have a book at home isn't really helpful when the teacher decides we're going to do deer time, and drop everything and read, or something similar like that. I do try to make sure that everybody leaves with something, and if it's not a chapter book, it's going to be something that's nonfiction. Another student checkout personality, which sometimes drives me crazy, is the copycat checkout. These are students who just want to do what the other kids are doing. So I see this both in boys and in girls. A student will come up to me and ask for something specific, and their shadow, this student who's following along, copying them, wants one too. And it's hard because they're not genuinely interested in what their friend is picking out, but they want to have the same book. And this can be also a little challenging because oftentimes I get requests from very strong readers, and they will be reading above grade level, and their copycat friend who just wants to be like them is getting that book not because it's a good fit or it's a book they can read on their own, but they just want to be like their friends. So that's one that you sort of have to be very careful about because you don't want to hurt anybody's feelings. The tug of war. I've seen this in lower L, not as much in upper L, but the tug of war over a book, especially if two students grab it at the same time, this can be interesting. Appealing to the adult that's in one of those kids, oftentimes if students sense a moral high ground, if one of the two kids realizes that if they relinquish the book, they will seem more adult and more considerate. This oftentimes creeps up, and you can find them deciding which one will get to check out the book first, and then perhaps share it during read time in the classroom. The randomizer. The randomizer is the student who is very scattered in the books that they want. So this individual might ask me for a cookbook, and then it might ask me, no, I changed my mind. I want to go have a Fancy Nancy book. And say, no, I changed my mind. I want a Ricky Ricotta book. No, I changed my mind. I want to go get a book on Pluto. And all of a sudden I'm crisscrossing the library because this individual is very all over the place when it comes to their interests. And the consensus in the room was 3 strikes and you're out. So if you give and offer three suggestions and show the students those selections and they still aren't happy, and then you need to recognize there are still lots of kids in your library who also need your help. Continuing with challenging student personalities is the rut. The student who repeatedly, week after week after week, goes to the very same spot in the library. And I love that kids want to be experts. I love that kids want to read everything they can on a certain topic. However, at some point, we do need to intervene a little bit to see if we can't diversify that reading a little bit, because if we notice that the kids are bringing the same books home week after week, you better be certain the parents are seeing this as well. And somebody once said on a podcast I listened to that we shouldn't get in the way of our students wanting to read the same book or a book from the same section in the library again and again and again, because much in the way that we like to listen to our favorite songs repeatedly, or we find ourselves watching a movie whenever it shows up on the TV. I know for me, it's Oh Brother, Where Art Thou with George Clooney. For other people, it might be Forrest Gump. But no matter what's going on, if your favorite TV show comes on, you just have to watch it. But when kids are in a rut, at some point, respect the fact that it might be a good idea to maybe try something new. The next checkout personality that I've noticed somewhat, especially with my older students, when they say, do I have to check out a book? And I said, yes, I would like you to check out a book. And so that student just reaches over and grabs the first book on the first shelf and says, fine, here, check it out. And this is frustrating to me because all too often, because the picture books are right next to my checkout with my littles, this older student will have grabbed a very favorite book of my younger students. They'll have grabbed something that my students in my lower grades really love to read. And this frustrates me because they're just going through the motions because they think that's all they have to do. So when it comes to taking care of this appeaser, oftentimes they are the first in line. They just want to grab a book so they can go stand in the back of the library and talk with their friends. And I really do shut that down very quickly because I don't have many times that I get to see my older students. And I really do want to encourage them to try reading books in the library and not just using this as social time with their friends. I will give you a couple examples of lessons I do, which really push the kids into the collection to sort of sample different corners of it. And I think you'll see what I mean when I show those to you. The next challenging student personality are the show-offs. These are the kids who pick something because they carry their books around like accessories. And oddly enough, I read a cool article because adults do this too. Not so much with a Nook or a Kindle, but oftentimes adults will, in very public places, carry a book, and it is somehow intended to demonstrate just how eclectic or smart they are or inquisitive by having something impressive looking underneath their arm. Obviously, with ebooks and Nooks and Kindles, that's less of an issue. More likely, we have no idea what somebody is reading when you see them on the train or you see them in the airport. But for our students, oftentimes the show-off is the one who grabs physically the largest book you have in the library. And I was unfortunate to inherit a library whose previous librarian, apparently acquired a great number of coffee table books on sports and on pets. And at some point, they became absolutely dilapidated, and I've weeded out most every one I can find because they are physically the most cumbersome books. And my library is 49 steps up, and invariably when those books get dropped, they get ruined. But the show-offs don't have any intention on reading the book. They're just wanting to carry something around that looks impressive. My next challenging student personality is the Princess Pouty McPoutface. And these are students who have already established in their head what book they're going to check out. And when they get to the library to realize it's not there, they absolutely have a meltdown. Princess Pouty McPoutface can oftentimes be an only child or a child who has figured out that if you throw a tantrum, the adults in the room will cave. And this is also a behavior which needs to be shut down right away. When students think that they can come up and have a tantrum and get what they want, unfortunately, the adults at home have been the reason why they think this strategy will work with all adults. And usually by the middle of kindergarten, we can sort of work through this. And oftentimes, the better you know your collection and you can show the kids what fun new books you have, that is a great solution. Say, look, I have this brand new book, and I bet you don't have this book at home, and I bet you would love it if you read it. Sometimes I actually will page through a book with a particularly stubborn checkout just because I think they need that kind of option given to them. Some solutions. First of all, persistence. Play the long game. You're going to be their librarian for years. Now, for me, it's between 6 and 7 years that I could be teaching these students. We have a Young Fives program and all the way up to 5th grade. So play the long game. Remember, this isn't about your immediate wins. It's about building a relationship with your students. Another great solution is to update copies with fresh covers. I have found particularly with older students, they can be very judgmental about the condition of a book. And when you say don't judge a book by its cover, well, that's garbage. We all judge a book by its cover. So definitely make that investment in titles which would have a chance of being checked out, were it not for the fact that the cover you're looking at is particularly ancient. Also, find your cheerleaders for your titles. I oftentimes, we all do, we all know who our readers are. And the students who genuinely, sincerely read the books that we hand them each week, give them an opportunity to show off just how much they love a book. You know, a little bit of praise and say, hey, why don't you tell the class why you like that book so much? Because I know that you just finished it, and I bet somebody else in this class would like to read it. In addition, another trick I learned, which actually I just kind of figured this out on myself, all by myself. I was kind of proud. Pushing last year's read alouds to this year's readers. So remembering which books get read aloud to classes, and then the next year use those books and say, hey, guess what I found on the shelf? And the students are like, oh, our teacher read that to us last year. I said, oh, I know. Your teacher read this to you last year, and this year you're going to read it yourself. Some more solutions. I would invest in your collection with high-interest graphic novels, weird but true, and a lot of nonfiction, which might be enticing to kids who don't want the commitment of a long chapter book. I also firmly believe in delivering special orders. Because we do interlibrary loans with other libraries, I make a big deal when somebody's book that they requested came in. Hey, guess what? It arrived. And the kids are like, yes. And then the other students are like, wait a minute. You got a special book? Yeah, I got a special book because I asked for it. And the kids get very excited about that. I would also consider, although it might be a little counterintuitive, increasing the number of books you check out to your students. Now, you might get a little pushback from the people who shelve your books, if it's an assistant or you have student helpers or parent volunteers, or if it's you. But sometimes giving the students the option of a second book or a third book really does give the kids a reason to take a chance on titles when they're not sure they're going to like them. Another piece of advice when it comes to dealing with difficult book advisory and checkout is to push your titles all the time. And that means to infuse your titles in every single lesson you teach your students. Whatever you do, it comes from the shelf, which means whenever you teach a lesson, the books you're going to use for those examples are coming from your bookshelf. And that way students can see, oh, wait, can I check that book out? Are you using it? I'm like, oh, absolutely, take it. So I like to do a bunch of student interest inventories, and I included in this presentation 2 examples. These student interest inventories are actually done at the tables, and it gives the kids an opportunity to start wrapping their heads around what they like, and they're color-coded. So I have a 2nd grade example and a 5th grade example, and obviously you can do whatever you want and change whatever you for the grades that you're going to use, but it does give the kids an opportunity to reflect. It's a reflection activity, and they can think about what kinds of books they like before we do our book checkout. I'm also a big fan of clipboard activities. These are the best when your principal is walking through the library with a prospective family or somebody who's moving into the neighborhood. They see the students engaged with the collection. The scavenger hunts are really fun. I've given you an example that I use in 3rd grade. And the scavenger hunts really ask questions, usually like 10 questions, that force the kids to go throughout both your fiction and your nonfiction and your picture books. And they have to find things like call numbers and titles and authors. And the nice thing is that I encourage them, when you're doing this activity, if you see anything that you like, grab it. And oftentimes the kids will have their checkout done while they're doing the assignment. And I tell them, put those books underneath your table spots. And when we do our book checkout, you're good to go. Another activity which I included in the presentation, and you can see it in the link, is a 4th grade Find Your Favorites. And this is very basic, but it's also a clipboard activity and has 3 columns for favorite books, favorite authors, and favorite hobbies. Because all too often when you ask students, hey, tell me the last book you really enjoyed, or do you have a favorite author? Maybe we can find books that person has written. Or, hey, what do you do after school? Or what do you do for fun? Or, hey, you went to the Grand Canyon last year? Let's find a book on that. So oftentimes asking the kids to think about these things for themselves really does help your reader's advisory. Couple more solutions really quickly is to offer opportunities for student buy-in. And I didn't go into a lot of detail, but I've oftentimes asked for kids to submit questionnaires. I give them an opportunity to choose while I'm looking for books. I say, hey, look, I need to buy some more books. What do you think I should get? Sometimes this is formal. You can have a little request paper so that when those books come in, you can actually deliver the books to the kids who requested them. Oftentimes, when kids take ownership for certain corners of the library, you'll find that they become very enthusiastic about sharing that with their classmates. Another solution is to incorporate a great deal of face-outs and eye-catching displays. My students will check out anything when they can see the front cover. And while that might create sort of a domino effect when somebody starts tipping the books over, all too often, that's the easiest way for me to push books which haven't necessarily gotten a lot of traffic, and that is by doing face-outs on top of the bookcases. I also do a big push with titles which correspond to movies our students have seen. So I do a whole lesson on if you saw the movie, you might like this book because the book came first. And I also enjoy, and I haven't done this as much as I should, but pushing books which have been banned. At the elementary school, that's less of an issue because it's usually Harry Potter, which is the easiest and obvious choice, and Captain Underpants. But I know for the upper grades, anytime you push books which have come under scrutiny and have been challenged, students always take an interest. As well as using book trailers. You can find book trailers along with the movie trailers for the corresponding movies on YouTube, as well as there are booktubers. I know that some folks have had some success with booktubers. I haven't, quite honestly, because I find that a great deal of that has to be previewed before you show it to the students. So apparently my brief overview was not as brief as I had promised, but I do feel very strongly that reader's advisory is something we shouldn't give up on. It's something that we can all succeed at, but it does take time and relationship building and a great deal of thought sometimes. I hope you have an opportunity to go through the presentation, especially to get the links to the assignments that I talked about. Those have been used in my library with a great deal of success, and students really enjoy them. I would like to extend a very special thank you to everyone whose perspectives and resources made recording this episode so meaningful. And I really want to welcome you and all listeners to reach out with your feedback and episode suggestions. The topic for our next episode will be Littles in Our Libraries. I hope you will tune in.